the fee. Is part of.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our May Human Services Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. I think it might be good to do introductions. We have a few people that at least are newer to me. So let's start in the room. Rima, can you go first?
I am Rima Shamia. I'm a transportation planner with the Capital Region Transportation Committee.
I'm Carrie Blanchard from the Town of Colony Senior Resources Department.
Mark Castiglione with the Regional Planning Commission.
Carrie Ward with the Capital Region Transportation Council.
And Sandy Missos, I'm the executive director of the Transportation Council.
And I'm gonna call names on the Zoom call. So first on my list here is Tom.
Hi, Tom Vaughn from New York State DOT, Public Transportation Bureau. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Diane. Well, Diane Conroy-Lasavita is here with us from the Colony Senior Resource. Oh shoot, Colony
Senior Service.
Senior Service Centers. Mary Foreman.
Everybody, Mary Muller, Executive Director, Albany Guardian Society.
Super. Jay Mariani. If you get a minute, if you could put your name and affiliation in the chat, that would be helpful for us. Josie McPherson.
Josie McPherson, and I'm from the Bureau of Community Chronic Disease Prevention, the Department of Health.
Super. Thanks for joining us. Peggy?
Hi, I'm Peggy Osborne from the Town of Bethlehem Senior Services.
I thought so too, but I also realized.
Shirley?
Hi, this is Shirley Madewell. I'm also from the New York State Department of Health at the Bureau of Community Chronic Disease Prevention within the Disability and Health Program.
Thanks for joining us. Shoot. Mary Foreman, can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Now
Oh,
I
okay.
can.
I'm with Schenectady County Senior and Long-Term Care Services. We're Office for the Aging.
Great, thank you. All right, so the first thing I have on the agenda is the draft notes from the last meeting, which I believe I emailed out, but I should be sharing them. Can anybody confirm you can see them on your screens?
Yes, we can.
Thanks, Tom. Well, you guys will have to imagine them, can't get them on. There's attendees. We'll talk a little bit more about the tools of the trade today. Does anybody have any changes to those? All right, great, thank you for that. The first thing we have on the agenda for today is for Shirley to talk about the wheelchair charging stations, which we did discuss at our last meeting, I think we do have a little bit of a group set up to communicate more with New York State Department of Health on this funding opportunity. But they've had a little bit of staffing changes, so Shirley thought it could be helpful for her to come and talk to us in person. Shirley, do you need to be able to share your screen?
No, I really just wanted to be able to kind of just do a little conversation right now. I realize that many of you may have had this conversation before, and I do appreciate if it's kind of a recap. I only joined in December, and so I'm really just trying to get caught up. Where we are right now is that we have allocated about $10,000 to work towards the charging stations. Our understanding is that they are around $1,000 a piece. So our hope is to be able to distribute 10 charging stations. So not a lot, but it's kind of the funding that we're starting with, and it gives us kind of a proof of concept of doing this work. So I know that you all maybe have discussed in the past where you think these things would be of value. You were kind of the originators of the idea, but I guess I kind of wanted to hear firsthand what was some dialogue around it, just getting some sense, because we want to be able to start moving on this, get it going as quickly as we can. But I kind of felt like I needed to kind of go back to the beginning to understand what it is that we're trying to accomplish. So I apologize again if this is a reiteration for any folks, and I appreciate your patience with me trying to get caught up and learn so I can move this forward. So I guess one of my first questions would be, in terms of the charging stations, I'll just take a step back for a moment. The concept I know we have done with some parks and recreation areas with the DEC. I think we've done them with some other areas as well. But the goal would be to put a charging station either in an outside location or an inside location that's really going to be well trafficked by people who might be using a mobility, a mobile, a power wheelchair. And I think one of our original thoughts was around bus stops and areas that might be frequently visited, where there also might be some difficulty in terms of the amount of distance that people might have to travel then to get to residential areas. So those were some of first thoughts. There had been some recommendations of also trying to get some of these wheelchair charging stations in places that might be close to tourist attractions, so that people might feel that they could access a location and not run out of range to get back to where they would need to charge after that point. So I guess I would open it up to ask for what people's thoughts have been in the past, any questions they might have about what we're thinking about doing, and if any ideas that you might have about where you think charging stations, if you have concerns about them. So I'd just like to open it to the floor to get kind of a background on what you all might be thinking about these charging stations.
Does anybody want to jump in?
I'll
I will.
throw out something, just an idea. I'm not sure if it has been discussed, but charging stations on the accessible location of buses.
Well, I was just gonna ask, have we reached out to CDTA at this point to coordinate? I think this is something that they may be open to.
Okay.
Particularly in the Route 5 corridor where they're currently rebuilding a lot of the stations. Might be a really easy win-win opportunity.
That sounds very good. Yeah. That was definitely a thought of where we wanted to go, but I wanted to make sure that I was kind of hearing what people's thoughts were, because I'm coming into this late. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't jumping the gun in a direction.
Yeah, and I agree. I've heard from someone in this community about the tourist attractions and areas like when you go to like a Tulip Fest, for example, Washington Parks, these sort of facilities, that having options there would be a great benefit.
Right, right. Or even downtown where there are the both the MVP Arena and the other larger building that often has like the home show or the State Museum, those they're all kind of collected in that sort of area. So
You know, the Skyway, you know, the
mhm,
11.5 site, you know, those are just obviously in Albany, all those cities have similar
mhm,
types of events.
yeah.
Those seem like good places to start with, you know, with the limited funding, and I would suggest coordinating with, maybe CDTA can do something to build upon this, so your 10,000 could be spent in other locations first.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the ideas we had, um, and this was just a random brainstorm, is if people thought this was of interest, to see if organizations would be interested in matching it along the way, that they may be thinking that like, oh, if you put one up, we'll put one up too. Um, so that's something we wanted to look into as well.
One idea that was discussed the last time that it was brought up at this committee was, there seemed to be some interest looking at emergency shelter locations.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Was the thought related to permanent shelters, such as like in downtown Albany, or in terms of shelters that had stood up in an emergency event? What was the thinking there?
I
Do you
believe
know?
it was, I believe it was related to an emergency event,
Okay.
but I can pull up the meeting notes.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea, but personally, I think both would be a very good idea.
Mhm.
With the emergency events, we've had some good communication with the New York State Department of Health Office of Health Emergency Preparedness, and we thought that being able to have some mobile charging stations as part of their field operation kits would allow them then to be able to deploy um, charging stations to places that seem like that's a good need there, maybe having some in stock, one or two at least, to be able to deploy if they needed to. So I think that's probably in good alignment with that conversation. So that sounds very good.
This Mary Foreman, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Yep. How long does it take to charge? And if it's hot, do you need ventilation? If it's cold, do you need heat? Do the CDTA bus shelters have electricity already?
So we would need to, if it was going to be an outside facility, it creates a lot more work because there does need to be some kind of shelter formed around it so that for the safety of the person. So I think that there would have to be some good conversation if we were doing outside locations um, to ensure that those things were being built. And I think that could be a prohibiting factor, honestly, unless we could get CDTA to kind of work with us, because we really do need to be able to have a shelter that can be able to enclose the person, cover them for the amount of time that it would take to charge. I am not sure about the length of time. Um, I do know sometimes it can take longer, but I believe we might be talking around 20 to 30 minutes. So one of the other ideas I had thought about was um, in libraries, uh, because that's an inside location and it's a location that's visited quite a bit. I don't know if there are other thoughts about that, but um, I feel like those external pieces, they're good strategy, but may have some challenges in implementation for the reasons that you're bringing up, Mary. That it was Mary who was asking that, right? I just wanted to make sure. Mary Foreman.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yep. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. No, I think what you're bringing up is definitely, I think, a challenging factor that we have to be mindful of.
Well, let me ask further. What if CD, well, I guess it would take 20 minutes. Is there a transfer station for CDTA, or is there or the Star Bus or CDTA bus? Is there some way you could charge it while you're taking the Star Bus?
Yeah, that is a nice idea to be thinking about. Could a portable one be on the Star Bus? Especially because sometimes those Starbucks rides can go a bit far if people are, if they're making a long travel out of the day. Uh, and it may be the case that even a shorter charge will get them what they need. So I think that's a good thought to think about. I think I had thought about that as well, but I wasn't sure if that would even be an option. So I think in talking to CDTA to see could we have a portable one on the Star Bus or in other jurisdictions similarly on their accessible buses. I think that's a very good idea.
I think what I'm hearing is one thing that would help is some criteria by which you're planning on if you're gonna limit the funding to locations in which you have a enclosed shelter, you are gonna kind of shut the door on
Yeah.
some opportunities, but it would be helpful to know that that's sort of like a mandatory thing. Because we can spitball a lot of ideas, but if you're gonna put limits on the funding upfront, then.
No, yeah, I don't want to limit it. And I feel like I might be back at the beginning of a conversation that you're having, and I do apologize for having to start over. It just with the staffing changes for us, I really have to get a sense of what the picture is so that we can move forward. I do see the challenges in outside locations, but I absolutely would like to find a way around that. Anything that we could do to make it available in an external location, I think that's a good thing to do. If we could align that with bus stops, I do think that's a good thing to do. As, especially the bus stops that do the some of those express buses that go between Albany and Schenectady, so those longer traveling ones, those bus shelters. I want to be able to explore it before we say it's not possible. I don't want to give up on that before we've even tried. That's for sure.
Yeah, it just sounds like you guys are starting to limit yourselves. That's why I was saying if you're gonna.
No, I don't want us to start with limitations like that. I would much rather us do the research and find out we can't do it than not do the research at all.
So I can tell you that all of the Bus Plus stations have electricity now.
Okay.
Most of the rest of the CDTA system does not.
Yep.
So that's probably your first point of conversation is.
Yep. Okay. That's great. And the Bus Plus stations, they do the Albany to Schenectady. Do they also do Albany to Troy as well?
They do the red line, which is Albany to Schenectady, the blue line, which is basically downtown Albany, Troy to Coast, more or less. And the purple line, which goes more or less from downtown Albany out to Crossgates Mall and Crossgates Commons through the city.
There we go. I got disappeared there for a minute. All right, great.
This Mary Foreman, I have one more comment, and I don't know if you've gone down this route. Have you ever interacted with the Independent Living Center of the Hudson Valley?
Yes.
Okay, because those folks that use chairs would be able to tell you how and when they need a charge, and some of them travel all over all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely something I want to be doing. Now, we connected originally with Nile, which is the sort of the umbrella over all of the independent living centers. But I really did want to kind of connect directly with the independent living centers to do some feedback from those individuals at the independent living centers that feel like they might be able to give some insights into this. So I think that that's a very good place to start. as I said, we started with Nile, their sort of umbrella over it, but I'd like us to do something more direct. So that's, I don't know if anybody has any additional, but that's, I really just wanted to get kind of a background of your thoughts, and hope not to, hopefully not to waste your time too much in having to have the conversation again, but just to get a sense of what the thinking was so that we could be able to move forward with it. Are there any other, are there any concerns? I think my big concern is the external, but it doesn't mean I don't want to do it. I just want to see if there's a work around it. Any other concerns about the project, or things that you think could be pitfalls, that you talked about before?
I think we had talked about the types of like chairs and the types of connections
Mhm.
and like how many, is it 110 or 240 connection that needs to be made? Or, the electrical service that needs to be, like, we did have some discussion about that. That was in the context a little bit more of needing a partner agency to, like, the Department of Health would really need some kind of match or some kind of support by somebody. I think the discussion was a little bit more like people would apply to you, and so they would need to be providing something that maybe is where some of that conversation had come from.
Okay.
And then I know that at least when we had talked about it before, there was a particular vendor that you all were looking at using, and so we had done some research on in terms of what that vendor actually provides. And it was a little difficult to find out exactly what they need and what they do. So just like, if you were gonna contact the ARCs more specifically, that would be helpful. I know that, I don't think Denise is with us right now unless she joins late. But when I talked with her about it, she had never heard of that particular variety of charging station, and so just had a hard time providing feedback on how useful it would be or where it would be useful. And then the onboard CDTA thing, I think I had reached out to that particular vendor about onboard CDTA, and I think they had said that they were interested in doing that and they were looking into it, but it wasn't a possibility currently.
Not a possibility currently to put a charging unit on the accessible buses. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like the way their technology was, it just didn't work. Because it needs to be pulling charge unless it had a battery that was getting charged elsewhere and then putting on the vehicle. I think the thought was more that it would be pulling charge from the electrical system vehicle, which pulling, you'd be using gas presumably to generate that to recharge a battery that was internal to the vehicle. But anyways, that they were interested, but it wasn't a possibility. Like their system just didn't work with it.
That's very helpful. The partner that I was thinking that we really need to work with, is sort of connected to the Justice Center. They are called Trade, and they do a lot of work with supporting access to and understanding one's assistive technology, including power wheelchairs. So I thought, because they are part of state agencies, that would be a good partner for us to really kind of identify what is prominent in terms of the types of chairs and then the types of charging stations that make sense. So that's what I was thinking about in terms of a partnership to help us know what is the, I think I want to start from knowing what is the most common charging unit. And then we can work from there as to knowing how we'd want that installed. But I wanted to get a sense of we want to make sure that we're doing something that's effective and not just goes down a path that does something that isn't a common resource. Okay.
And then the last thing I'll note, I don't know if anyone might remember this conversation better, want to build on it, but I think that when we had talked about it before, there was discussion about a need for them in places where people have to go, where they don't know how long they're going to be there, like a court or a healthcare kind of facility. So.
Yes, I think that makes sense. Court, Department of Social Services, might be another one. Healthcare, I think, is a really good idea too. So I think those are really great ideas. And another person who had mentioned the tourism, they also mentioned places like malls to be able to help folks enjoy their time there as well. All right, so I think this really gives me kind of a sense of what the beginning part of the story was. I really appreciate folks taking the time. I think that's kind of what I wanted to get out of it, unless there were other comments or thoughts that folks wanted to contribute.
All right,
Right.
thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
The next thing we have on the agenda is Sandy. Do you want to just sit here?
On the slides is fine. So good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully you're seeing the PowerPoint for our in motion plan. Thanks, Carrie, for giving me some time. I'm just going to do a brief intro on our development of our new regional transportation plan, which we are calling the in motion plan, the plan to 2050. Next slide, please.
How do I make it go full slide, full show?
Oh, you put it in PDF.
That's what you gave me.
That's,
Can do that.
I can do it that way. So what the plan does is basically going to replace what we've referred to as New Visions here for many, many decades. Our most recent iteration of our regional transportation plan is New Visions 2050. And, obviously this plan develops the shared vision for our future transportation system. And we'll be working with the general public, governmental agencies, interested parties, a wide range of folks to develop this regional transportation plan in which we identify our regional priorities for investing federal transportation dollars. Next slide. So the process, we started, it's basically a 5-phase planning process. We started with data collection, which is sort of ongoing, but is more or less completed at this point. We're currently in what we're calling the inform stage and trying to get feedback from the public and folks like you, our advisory committee members, on the work that we've completed to date. We'll have public participation throughout all the phases of the process. And again, future phases include the Imagine phase, in which we'll be developing that regional vision. We'll have a decision-making phase in which we identify strategies and actions to implement. And then the final phase will be to review and adopt the final plan document. And all of this work will be completed by September of 2025. Next slide.
Oh, that's really the next.
There we go. So what have we completed to date? So as part of phase 1, our staff here at the Transportation Council completed a congestion management plan, which sort of identified strategies to reduce traffic congestion in the region, and those are wide ranging. The second component is the coordinated plan, which I know this working group had a hand in developing, which focuses again on issues of transportation related to seniors and those with disabilities. We also generated a regional trends story map, which sort of replaces a traditional existing conditions document with an interactive online tool that tells the story of our region and what the data is telling us about our current trends. There's complemented by a background information report. And then we also have a public involvement plan. So where we are sitting here in phase 2, we've launched a website. We have the branding and the logo that you're seeing. We're currently developing an issues and priorities survey. Well, it's not developing, it's actually issued publicly for folks to fill out the survey, and we're currently internally developing and revising long-range plan goals. Next slide. So that preliminary work in phase one, what did it lead us to in terms of the big picture kind of key trends? Our region is facing slow population growth. We've increasingly faced housing affordability concerns. The population is aging. We're seeing increases in traffic crashes, particularly for vulnerable roadway users like pedestrians and cyclists. We see an inequality of opportunity, and we mean this in a couple of ways. One is if you don't have a car, it takes you longer to access a job or to get to places you need to go. We also see this in the sense of seniors, where when they lose the ability to drive, increasingly they're having challenges of accessing basic services, healthcare, what have you. Our infrastructure in this region, roads and bridges, are aging. Increasingly, sprawl and disconnected development have further spread us across this region. At the same time, we are seeing investment in more transportation options, but they are a little more targeted in certain sections of the region and not as widespread as we'd like them to be. And then most recently, we've seen significant shifts in working from home. Our state employees, some of our office building dwellers are more and more increasingly working from home. So these are some of the key trends that came out of that preliminary work. Next slide. And I'm sharing these initial draft goals. These are under review right now. We've gotten a lot of feedback and comments from our task force working on this plan already. So these might change the next time you see them, and just to share at this point some of the general thinking. We want to think about our role with the transportation sector in reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and how we can achieve that in the longer term. We're going to be looking at the equity issues surrounding transportation, and making sure that we're considering disadvantaged populations in the plan. Safety remains a high priority in reducing those fatalities and serious injuries. This general catch-all goal of stewardship, which really kind of comes down to how we not only manage the environment, but maintain a sustainable transportation system over the long haul. We're coming up with hopefully some verbiage to address the prosperity, vitality, livability catch-all, but really that's intended to think about the role and the relationship between economic development, community livability, and quality of life. And then connectivity and making sure that we improve that access to key destinations for people and goods. So those are sort of the broad goals in development. Next slide. And so we wanted to introduce this to this group today because all of our advisory committees here, this group is one of 5 advisory committees here at the Transportation Council, will have a role in helping to shape this plan. So what your role will be as we move along throughout the process, we'll be asking you to review, to identify issues, or provide feedback on the products being developed in the plan. Some of the feedback that you should be thinking about is, did we adequately identify the issues through data or other analyses? Are the concepts that we're identifying reasonable? Are we reaching the right populations through our public participation process? And we're going to be seeking your input on how to reach some of the individuals in the constituency this group tends to work with. And then also, making sure that the products we're developing, are accurate, complete, and make sense to you folks. So one of the things we'll be asking of this group, as I said, is assisting with the promotion and identification of public involvement opportunities. Next slide. And one of the things that this group can help us to do to spread the word is we have a survey open now. We also have a 15-minute long go at your own pace virtual workshop available for folks to get familiar with the plan, understand what it is, why we're doing it. Again, review some of those preliminary findings from our existing conditions assessment. And then we're actually have the survey's only 3 questions long, along with some demographic questions, but the crux of the survey is, what are we missing? if you had the magic wand to invest in the transportation system, what would you be investing in? And then if you visited a place that you think had something about their transportation system you'd like to see implemented in the capital region, what is it and where is it? And that's essentially the survey that's going to be open throughout the month of May, but we're gonna close this survey on May 31st. And we'll make sure that you folks, get access to this slide and this, social media post, which you can, if you represent an organization here today, if you can assist us by maybe getting this posted on your social media. If you work in a nonprofit group, if there's a group that you think we should come to speak to, or we should some other way try to get the survey to them, we have multiple ways of doing that. We'd be happy to do that. And I think that's all I had today. I think that's the end of it. But if you have any questions or comments about the plan or the process, you can email me here at the office. But we'll be bringing this topic to this group in future meetings. We'll be sending, like I said, as products are developed, we'll be sending information around for your input and feedback. And it'll be a great way for you folks to stay engaged in the broader planning process, for the capital region. So if you have any questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
This is Shirley. I would definitely say we can disseminate it on our listserv, but if you're all right with it, I'd also like to pass it to our Chief Office of on Disability, and that's at the executive level. They're really working, they're very focused on employment, and transportation goes hand in hand with employment. So I think that she might be very interested in this. So if you send it to me, I will put it out on our listserv and I'll pass it along in that direction to try and get some higher level feedback on it for you.
Okay, great. We'll
Great.
make that happen. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Carrie. Next up on the agenda is a quick status on the New York State Master Plan for Aging. Unless anybody else has a status update, I don't think there is one. They had released the preliminary report back in August of last year, and as far as I can tell, the draft final report is still expected in early 2024, but is not actually out yet. So that's what, unless somebody saw something different, that's where I think we are with that. Okay, next up is the tools of the trade. So that's the biennial kind of workshop conference that we have. We've found a date, so we can hold that date, June 20th. It's a Thursday. We are looking at doing a collaboration this time with the Saratoga County Transportation Task Force, which isn't a county-run thing. It's through Captain Community Human Services. So ours will be in the morning into the early afternoon, and then we can absolutely stay for their portion of it, but then they'll kind of take over the programming in the middle of the afternoon to the end of the afternoon. We're looking at doing it at the Ballston Lake Elks Club, or Clifton Park Elks Club, but it's in Ballston Lake. And so for food, I'm told that they have, they're very good with their barbecues. So we're looking at just working straight through the Elks for them to provide us the food at their facility. So I just wanted to run that by you all. If somebody has a problem with that, let me know. Otherwise, we'll keep moving forward with that plan. In the past, at this event, we've had posters or visuals like set up around the room for people to look at. We've usually used the demographic stuff that we have included in the coordinated plan. We did that at the last one. That was like a preliminary view of what we were gonna have in the coordinated plan. So basically, we haven't done a new coordinated plan since then. So if I use that same data, it's gonna be the same exact posters that we had at the last one. So we can, I might even have them in a closet somewhere. I can just bring them. But if there's something else that you all think could be helpful or interesting for people to have kind of in the background as a visual, I can look at putting that together.
I don't know that it would be possible. So this is Shirley again. I don't know that it would be possible, but I think even if we couldn't do it this year and you did it in another year, a poster that gives a sense of disability information and the understanding that most people who have a disability are really relying on public transportation. So I think that there is some real benefit in terms of the transportation world to understand sort of how many people we're dealing with and the different types of disabilities that people may have and where that relates in with travel. So I don't know if that's something that could be done with this kind of turnaround, but if you ever have an interest in it, I'm happy to do something like that, even if we can't do it for this year, because I think there's a real value in giving that visibility to that population.
Are you thinking like nationally available data, like the American Community Survey data, or a different data source?
We can use the American Community Survey. We could use our BRFSS, our Behavioral Risk and Surveillance Survey. So which is also nationally available. So we could work with nationally available data if we wanted to. I think more, and that's totally fine to go with the American Community Survey. I'm thinking more so just being able to get that visibility out there and understand maybe some elements of what it means in terms of equity. A lot of times you see stuff with data, it gives you a sense of here's numbers of people in the situation, but you don't really have a sense of what does that mean in terms of challenges around inequities related to transportation. So that may be of interest for people to kind of learn a little bit more and understand a little bit more around what are inequities that happen related to transportation and how does transportation actually really make a huge difference in people to be able to get to the resources that they need to get to. And that's actually not just for people with disabilities, that's across the board.
Right. Okay, I'll reach out to you after
Yeah.
the meeting, maybe. Thank you. Anything else on the visuals? Okay. Another thing I forgot to put on the agenda, let me share the agenda. Is in the past, we've had tables so that people can put their, materials about their organization up on that. I think we will have the ability to do that again, so I'll probably, be asking at some point if you want to have one, and then they'll be at the back of the room and you can use it to just, whatever you want to share with people about programs that you have available or things that you do. I think we will probably have one that will put the stuff that Sandy was talking about today on, and another project related to safety on it. Okay, and then I shared this agenda. So the top two, item 7, letter C, speakers. The top 2 are confirmed. So we do have a speaker coming from the National Aging and Disability Transportation Center to talk about the funding that they have available and the kind of program priorities that they're seeking to fund. And we definitely have interest. Denise, you had given me the reference for her. I think it was Shelley Midori. She's definitely interested in coming to talk about the Olmsted implementation update.
Good.
So she'll be there, but she wasn't sure where they're going to be in their process and how much of a presentation she's going to be able to provide. Sorry, Denise, were you trying to say something?
No, I just said that's great. That's good. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. So then these other things were just ideas that we've, either talked about in the past or just that I thought could potentially be interesting. And if you see yourself on here, I definitely haven't asked anybody if besides CDTA, if they wanted to present anything. But there have been a couple of grantees, from the NEDTC in our region, and I won't call them out now because they're on the call and I haven't already asked you. But that could be interesting, especially with, having NADTC come. CDTA is already gonna be having a short little bit, in the Saratoga County portion. This is skipping ahead a little bit on the agenda, but one of their priorities in Saratoga County is, a flex expansion. And so they want CDTA to talk specifically about that, specifically in the Saratoga County context. But CDTA staff would be available to come and talk to us more generally. I know they've done this before. I also know we have some staffing changes. So I thought I'd see what how this group felt. They could talk about their travel training, the access transit, piece of the organization and what they do, what they're set up to do. I think in the context of Saratoga County, the Saratoga County effort, that could be interesting. And they could also talk about flex and, their bike share, car share, other Star Transit, their normal stuff that they talk about. So I'm gonna pause there. Is there a lot of interest or definitely a disinterest in having CDTA come for the morning portion? All right, so if I ask them to come, nobody would be upset.
It sounds good to me. This is Denise. If you need an answer, yes.
In the past also, I think Tom at some point had come to talk about updates to the New York State contract for vehicles. And I know there have been some changes related to the state contract going on this year or soon as well. Volunteer recruitment and retention has come up in a discussion for this workshop recently, the January meeting or maybe November. So Captain is willing to talk about that. There's a couple other organizations that have already come to talk to us about their volunteer recruitment and retention practices. We could do that again. I'm not, it's kind of in the CDTA boat of, a lot of us have probably heard the spiel before, but it could be useful. Master plan for aging, the transportation components. There was a transportation task force or work group as part of that. I don't know if we could get anybody from the master plan for aging to do it. I could probably put something together that we could review. So Shirley is here talking about the wheelchair charging opportunity. I think there might be some other disability related programs that could be of interest.
Yeah. And also I could certainly, if it were okay, I think, it would be nice if I could get a partner to work with me who has a disability. That's often very impactful for somebody to present on from a perspective of lived experience. Would that be okay if I could split that time with that?
Yeah, do you think you all would have interest in talking about some of your programs?
Yeah, I would. I certainly think we can. I definitely think there's some programs we could talk about. I also could take the opportunity to talk about the value of public transportation to people with disabilities. And that maybe, I don't know if that's something, it speaks to equity and it speaks to how valuable transportation programs are to this particular population. I don't know if folks would have interest in that, but I could otherwise certainly talk about the disability programs that we have.
Are there any thoughts from anybody else on the call about what Shirley's just said? All right, I'll talk to you more, after the meeting, Shirley.
Yeah, and I want it to be what makes sense for you guys. So, if my idea is not in alignment, that's totally cool. I can help you in whatever way you want.
Implementation of pedestrian ADA improvements on streets, that's something that we've been working on here in the office. I know I have it again a little bit further on the agenda, but we could talk about that program and about the challenges of implementation once people know where their facilities are not accessible. Transportation Council presentations on in motion, so that's what Sandy talked about today. She can do a longer presentation on that if we're interested. And we also have a large project happening now called Vision Zero, which is focusing on safety and preventing traffic crashes and particularly fatalities and serious injuries. So either or both of those are things that we can provide in Sandy's case, a longer presentation on, in my case, a presentation on. And then the last thing, I just found this, it's St. Lawrence County, which is in New York State, so by the St. Lawrence River. Their transportation systems organization is kind of interesting looking. I have not talked to anybody there, although we did have somebody from the Volunteer Transportation Center come present to us once. But I noticed that their bus operator, so it's a rural area, the county is contracting with the ARC of Jefferson St. Lawrence. So the ARC is actually the public transit operator. Somewhat using their own vehicles, but it looks like mostly using vehicles that the county has acquired using Federal Transit Administration funds. And then the Volunteer Transportation Center also has contracts, I believe with the county, to provide both mobility management services and also a first mile, last mile, which isn't restricted to a mile. But it's basically providing connections from wherever you live or need to go to the closest public transit stop. And then they are also providing, I guess, a rides to recovery program, which is focused on people with substance misuse issues and affiliated with mental health problems. So it's the Prevention Council, I think, providing funding through a partnership with the Volunteer Transportation Center. It looks like they are getting $42 per trip. So just the organization of that and what's happening looks like it could be an interesting thing to hear about. But again, I haven't contacted them at all. So are there one or two things on this list that seem more interesting or more worthwhile? Besides the NABTC and the Olmsted, those we definitely got confirmed.
Looks good to me.
All of it, you wanna do all of it?
Yeah.
For prioritizing, it may be good timing to have somebody talk about the master plan for aging for New York State. But that'll depend on the timing, as it probably won't be ready for prime time back home.
Tom, were you trying to say something?
No, I was just gonna say they're all very good topics. I think appreciate the expanse of all the items. Work.
Yeah, this is Shirley. I'll say that they all do sound very good. I really am interested in that St. Lawrence County one. And even though we're on the list, if you guys feel like, oh, there's ones that need to be here, you know, and you don't have a way to do everybody, I'm very flexible and I don't have to do a program, but I'd like to, but I think you have a lot of really wonderful things here. So if you need to figure out a way to eliminate someone, I'm a very flexible person. So you let me know if something else turns up to be more pressing in this type of environment. That's cool too.
Thanks for that. All right, so barring any strong feelings here, or let's say if you let me know within a week, then I will just pick whatever I think is gonna be most useful for the group. I have the agenda here. So the next item on the agenda was section 5310 funding. Our reviews, being the regional review group, were submitted to NISDOT a few weeks ago. And at this point, all I can say is that I expect the awards will be added to the state funding list by June. So basically, it would be public who was getting funded and for what. But Tom, since you're here, did you want to add anything to that?
Oh, well, we appreciate the effort to get it ready. And because, we have to run with the FTA deadlines in July to get the grants approved. So we're working towards that and hoping that you'll be able to do a STIP record for the awards. And we're grateful that the 24 money came through because it was able to get most of the folks who are requesting. I mean, we're pretty much oversubscribed across the state. And so the next solicitation won't be until the fall of 25, when we know the 25 money and can hopefully get access to the 26 money, because it really helps to purchase the vehicles. And what you'll notice about the vehicles, we're in the process of putting together the specs for the next 5-year contract, or 2-year with 3 extension year contracts, because the last one had such an issue with the costs, with the COVID and the supply chain issues. So we're hoping that we're going to narrow it down and get vehicles that can actually be delivered quickly.
So you're working on the specs for the next 2 to 3 years, so that would hopefully cover this. By the time this round actually got purchased, it would be covered in that.
Well, if we get these grants done in July and approved, we'll put the contracts out while the contract we have is up until January. So the new one will be new in January. And if somebody hasn't gotten their contract executed, they could use the new one, depending on, but that's, we'll see how fast we get through everything. And we're hoping that we get some more flexibility in the vehicles. And we're seeing whether any electric come in or any low emission can come in. So it's, we'll see how it works out. But the ones that you've recommended now, we're hoping to get ordered in the fall while the orders are still here. If somebody doesn't like any of the vehicles they have, we can certainly wait. We've awarded them funding till the next one comes out. And we'll know sometime in late fall of who we're awarding and what kind of vehicles they'll have. So while we're trying to move the contracts of the ones that were awarded this year, we're also can talk about what's coming next year, and if they want to wait to get a certain type of vehicle, it wouldn't be the worst thing. So if that makes sense, or you have any questions about what I've said?
I think it does to me. Anyways, thank you. Are there any questions for Tom?
Okay.
Okay. The next thing I have on here is the fact sheet that we had talked about at the last meeting, what to do when motorized wheelchairs lose power. I think that was going pretty good, but then there was a realization that it should include language related to wheelchair recovery. So if there's an emergency where someone gets separated from their chair in an ambulance or in some kind of emergency response vehicle, you know, what then is there best practice procedure or a way that people are ensuring that people can get reunited with their wheelchair and how? Shirley, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so I did get some great feedback. Thank you for the connections that were made there. The person, Robbie, yep, that was fantastic. And I did get some other feedback as well. So I'm just waiting for one last bit of feedback, and then I'm going to do a final internal review, and we'll get it into our executive review process. But we did really get some good feedback on that. Turns out that generally EMS, fire, police have a priority where that if they can't transport the wheelchair with the person, which is likely if it's a power wheelchair, they will find a safe place to store. But there was also an advisement that if the person has a plan to have that a plan for what to do with the wheelchair, that they might carry that on a card with them. So I wanted to follow up on that with a disability rights advocate person that I have recently met and see what her thoughts on that suggestion are. So I just want to bounce that past her, and then I think we're in really good place to move it forward.
Okay, thank you. The next thing I had here was an update from the Saratoga County Transportation Task Force, and I don't think, in fact, I'm sure that Andy wasn't going to be able to join us today. But basically they are still meeting. They're actually been working on putting together some branding, like a logo for the group. And they're partnering with us. So they're kind of putting together a event, you know, after the Tools of the Trade on June 20th. And they're still looking at kind of first mile, last mile connections in conjunction with CDTA flex related services. And they're also still interested in something on Route 9 and a better connection at the northern part of our region into Glens Falls. The next thing is the transition plan. So the city of Troy's the public comment period on that ended. We got 4. And so we're working on incorporating those into the plan and finishing it. Town of Guilderland is under internal review with town staff now, which should be just about done. And then we've just funded 4 new ones in the region, and those will be in Clifton Park, Menands, Rensselaer, and also in Wilton. So they haven't started yet, but they should be getting started this year. If you're interested in particularly participating like for public outreach or on an advisory kind of role in any of those, just let me know. Capital Region Vision Zero Safety Action Plan. We will soon have a website that will be live for that will have a map for everyone to post where they think problem locations are, which may be of interest to you. And we are also working on finding locations where we can do demonstration projects of new kinds of safety infrastructure, small scale demonstration projects in the region. And also putting together equity priority areas, which would be mostly a geographic kind of thing, like locations in the region, and a methodology for that. And then, of course, reviewing, crash data and looking at what locations are, we've seen a lot of fatal and serious injury crashes and locations that are high risk, even if we haven't seen crashes at them yet. And I do want to note, if you have heard a lot about safety work and crashes in the past, this is a little bit different in the sense that we're really focusing on the fatalities and serious injuries. So it's not necessarily where there are a lot of crashes, but where there are a lot of bad crashes. And then, what is that? Oh, the New York State Association of Mobility Management. I sent that out in an email. They're doing a mobility summit July 24th to 25th in Ithaca. The mobility management that they're talking about is really like connecting people with information and filling in the gaps. So it was kind of like the Rides to Recovery program that I mentioned in St. Lawrence County. That would, they probably consider that part of their like mobility management program. Caseworkers connecting people to that program to be able to access rides. And then I forgot the first item on the agenda, because it's usually the last item on the agenda. But if there is any public comments or moves around the table that anyone wants to share with the group, please speak up. Going once, going twice. Okay. And so we usually set our next meeting at our meeting, but we need to start setting them at the end of the year for the next year. So for the rest of the year, we're looking at Monday, August 5th at 2 p.m. and Monday, November 4th at 2 p.m. Just making sure that those are okay. And I think they are. So that's all that I have for today. Thank you for
Carrie.
joining. Yes, Peggy?
I'm looking at, oh, never mind. Never mind. I was looking at the wrong calendar date. Sorry.
Oh. All right, so thank you again. If you have any thoughts on those presentations for the tools of the trade, let me know within the week. Otherwise I'll just pick a couple. Thank you. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you.